Greetings, teachers, principals, superintendents, central office staff, educators in all capacities. This is Principal Kafele. Got a little message for you in the context of where I am right now. I'm down in a city called Troy, Alabama. The city where one of my biggest heroes, Congressman John Lewis, was born. John Lewis, known as the leader of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, leader of so many of the freedom rides throughout the South, leader or one of the leaders of the march from Selma to Montgomery in 1965, one of the speakers at the March on Washington. The man had done much, and certainly he's a hero of mine. So I'm in the city of his birth, Troy, Alabama. But being down here, I was invited down here by a principal who's also a pastor. And he asked me to come down and keynote a male empowerment summit that he organized and coordinated. The first, which will be, I'm sure, annual Male Empowerment Boys to Men Summit. I came down and keynoted this summit, so I had an opportunity to speak to a lot of young men, teenagers and younger. And I spoke to them in a keynoting capacity where also the other adults were in the room. And then I had an opportunity to speak to the groups in breakout sessions. And what a tremendous day it was. And that was yesterday, speaking to these young men from down here in the deep South in Alabama. What an experience it was. What a strong day it was being with these young men. And what a great experience it was kind of looking in their eyes and seeing the connections that were made with them being able to relate to a lot of what I was saying, being able to relate to me as a young man who had his own trials and tribulations when I was their age, but emerging into the educator, the speaker, the consultant, the man, the human being that I am now. So one thing about yesterday's conference, though, is the reason that I even took the time sitting here in my hotel room to record this video for you. A young man, well, let me set it up for you. I posed a question during the question and answer to all the young men in the room. I said, how many of you are going to college? And I knew instinctively that all the hands would go up because they always go up. So all the hands went up. It's the same thing as typically I ask a group of young men when I'm in the inner city or rural school districts and they're predominantly African American, and I may ask, how many of you want to rap? And a large number or percentage of their hands go up, and I may follow that up with, how many of you want to play professional basketball? And a lot of hands, if not all, go up. And then I'll ask, how many of you want to play professional football? And once again, all the hands go up. But in this case, I asked about college, anticipating all the hands would go up, and they did. But then I asked a follow-up. And it was interesting how this came about, because initially I didn't ask the question. There was a 9-year-old that after all the hands had come down, this 9-year-old, his name was Emery. His hand stayed up. So I'm thinking to myself, wonder why his hand is still up. So I called on him, a 9-year-old young man. I said, why is your hand still up? He said, I want to tell you that I'm going to Harvard. And all this emotion overcame me. I felt like I was going to have a breakdown emotionally and start crying. But I didn't want the boys to see that. And that's not to say that I wanted to send a message that real men don't cry, because real men do cry. But in that context, I didn't want to explain that because we were dealing with other subjects. So I had to catch myself and restrain myself from crying. Because when that 9-year-old said to me, I want to go to Harvard. And then I followed up by saying, and what do you want to study? And he said, I want to study various different species. That was so abnormal. I'm not accustomed to even the teenagers necessarily knowing what school they want to attend and what major they want to study. But here this 9-year-old, he articulated this thing so clearly. I want to go to Harvard, Principal Kafele. and I want to study various species. 9 years old. So then today, 24 hours later, I spoke to the entire church, and I referenced Emery. And I said, this 9-year-old young man knew that he wanted to be a college student. He knew he wanted to attend Harvard University, and he knew what he wanted to study, various species as he framed it. Wow. 9 years old. So as I said to the congregation this morning, if he doesn't reach that goal, if his idea, if his dream, if his vision doesn't become his reality, then that's probably because we dropped the ball somewhere, us as adults. We dropped the ball. We allowed him to get distracted. We allowed him to get sidetracked. And now that little young boy of 9 years old is living a life that's other than what he projected when he was age 9. So my purpose for making this video then is to say to you, black boys need black male role models in their lives and in their schools. Let me repeat that. Black boys need black male role models in their lives and in their schools. Here's what I'm saying. I know the reality of schools. I know that schools are comprised of men and women, and as far as staff is concerned, of various different races and ethnicities. I get that. I understand that. As a principal, I had staffs of various different races and ethnicities and of both genders. So I get that. And I have no criticism about it. I've written about the fact that this is not my concern. Whomever's in that classroom, I always say, as long as you can demonstrate to me that you are passionate about children, passionate about teaching and learning, and passionate about those areas of deficiency relative to your own professional growth and development, you're passionate about improving yourself, then I'm fine. I welcome you with open arms on my team. But on the other hand, within that day, I still need that boy exposed to that man, that positive black man who is going through some of the same challenges, the same trials, the same tribulations as that young man sitting in that classroom, whether it be elementary, middle, or high school. I need him to see that man. I need him to see that successful man, whatever success means, however we define it. I need him to see him. I need him to be able to talk with him. I need him to be able to be engaged by him. I need him to be able to touch him through a handshake or a hug. I need him to be able to have sustained interaction with him. That might be his teacher. It may not be his teacher. If it's not his teacher, fine. I wrote a book back in 2009. It's called Motivating Black Males to Achieve in School and in Life. I am eternally grateful and thankful for ASCD publishing that book. That book has been read by tens of thousands. And in that book, I break down how to start, how to launch a young men's empowerment program in the school. So that instead of an after-school program or a before-school program or during lunch program or during electives program, a program within the school during the school day where these boys can see some real strong, positive men that look like them come into the school, engage with them, talk with them, interact with them, share their experiences, share their wisdom, share their knowledge with these young men, where these young men could look at them and see themselves as if they were mirrors for them. See, again, who's teaching math, who's teaching science, who's teaching language arts, who's teaching history? That's not my concern. If it's a black man for these black boys, great. If it's not a black man for these black boys, great still. That's not my problem. That's not my issue. My issue is, am I going to be able to bring these men into the school to spend quality time with these boys so that they can share this information, so they can share this inspiration, so they can share this empowerment and yet we don't compromise the academic program in the process. And then give that boy purpose for being in that classroom in the first place. So that now he's intrinsically inspired to soar, as opposed to us solely demanding that he soars. Yeah, Young Men's Empowerment Program, where we require that the young man comes to school dressed just like me here on the video. Shirt and tie, slacks, shoes, and a belt to hold his pants up. I'm saying to you, teacher, principal, superintendent, assistant superintendent, commissioner, director, supervisor, counselor, aide, whomever the case may be, educator in whatever your capacity, we have got to bring these men into the schools. They're all over the place. They're in the community. We just have to have the audacity to tap into them, to approach them, to ask them, or even require them, speak to them in a way that they understand that it's an obligation that you come into our schools and you engage with our young men. Because see, when I ask these young men, do you want to be a rapper? Because that's what's within their small world. So they want to be that which they see in this world that is so small for them, that the world is not big enough for them because they haven't been exposed to the larger world and where they fit within it. Or when I ask this youngster, do you want to be a basketball player? Well, if he's watching LeBron James play all the time, he's watching Kobe Bryant play, he's watching these various different NBA players play, and then he sees the guys in his community, in his neighborhood playing, well, then in his small world, this is what I want to do. I see them, they look like me. I want to do what they do. And regardless of his skill level, in his mind, he can play at that professional level. Or NFL, football. And he's seeing again these black men who are successful, who look like him. So because I see them, I want to do what they do within my small, narrow world. That young man is thinking that's all he can do. But here's what I'm saying. I'm saying if you bring these men from other walks of life, I mean the thousands of other things that a young man can do. Men representing the thousands of other careers, the thousands upon thousands of other professions, the thousands of other things that they can do. I'm saying that if you expose them to these men and they are right there in your community, I don't care where your school district is. I don't care if you're in some big city, a smaller city, in some rural environment. It doesn't matter. I'm saying that those men are there. Men who either were just born into a good situation and were able to walk that narrow path and make the right decisions, and here they are successful, or men who had to go through some things, men who were challenged with some things, men who made some bad decisions along the way, men who went through all sorts of trials and tribulations, but here they are successful, or men who never quite made it out of that hole they got themselves into. Your boys need to hear from them too, because now they can articulate the mistakes they made and explain why it is that they can't do some of the things that they would like to do because of the several bad decisions that they may have made along the way. So I'm saying all this to say this. I want to recommend that if you haven't read my book, Motivating Black Males to Achieve in School and in Life, I want to recommend that you do. Particularly chapter 5, the final chapter, where I discuss how to create a young men's empowerment program. It goes through how to put together a committee and develop a needs assessment and make decisions as to how your program would look. It talks about Power Monday, those young men's empowerment sessions where the young men are coming to school on a Monday or whatever day you feel is the best day or the appropriate day for your school, where they come in and looking like me, dressed with their shirt, tie, slacks, shoes, and a belt. It talks about all the variables to developing a program which increases the probability that your boys understand their roles as male students and their roles as evolving into men and what that all entails, being a man, in their case, a black man, as opposed to so many of them just going by the wayside. We're losing too many, and we're not going to cure this thing through bombarding them with math and reading and writing and science and history. Those are all subjects which are necessary, but that's not what's going to resolve the problem. That's not what's going to resolve the crisis. That's not what's going to resolve the emergency that we find ourselves in, this state of emergency, because that's what it is. That's what I call it all the time. But I'm saying, on the other hand, when we bring in these successful men and that boy can look at that man and say, wow, you look like me. And then that man goes on and articulates that, yeah, it wasn't easy growing up. I went through some things too growing up. I went through some challenges myself growing up. Because see, when I go into a school and I talk to young men, I can tell them about my experiences. Because let me tell you something, educator. It wasn't easy for me. It wasn't easy being a black boy growing up. It was not. Being a black boy was tough. Being a black boy was not easy. It was not an easy journey. When I lived in the inner city amongst black males, that was not easy. When I moved out of the inner city and lived in an environment that was predominantly white, that was not easy too. They both had their own unique challenges, and I had to learn to navigate both. Well, it becomes a powerful expression when I can share that story with a young man who's going through some similar challenges in his life. So I'm saying all this to say, as I close, black boys need and require black male role models, either in their lives or either in their schools. Since this video is directed at educators, I'm saying to us, I don't care if you're a teacher, you're a counselor, a social worker, a psychologist, a principal, assistant principal, the superintendent of schools, a director, a supervisor, the commissioner, and folks that work in the State Department. I don't care who you are. I'm telling you that we got to bring these models into these schools. We're losing too many of these boys. My life is devoted to them. I really don't have a life. I tell people that all the time. My life is this work. My life is the contents of this video. This is all I do. It's a Sunday afternoon. I could be home with my family. I'm down here in Alabama. I live in New Jersey. I'm down here in Alabama, working with boys in Alabama that I've never met before. I'm on a mission. I'm living my purpose. Got to save these young men. The biggest crisis, the biggest challenge in education today is the crisis and challenge of the black male learner. I hate to admit that, but I got to admit it. The biggest crisis, the biggest challenge that we face in education is the crisis and the challenge of the black male learner. We got to fix this thing. We got to go head on with it. Full steam ahead. I'm of the firm belief that we will win. We will be victorious. But our focus has got to be concentrated. And one of the ways of doing it is letting these boys see that they are people who have already walked your path, overcome it, surmounted the odds, and they are now victorious. Let's expose them. Black boys need black men in their lives as role models, either within their lives, as I said, or in school. Let's make that happen. I did it as a principal for many years. I was successful as a principal. People rave over the work I did as a principal. But I know why so many of those boys did well. Because we had that Young Men's Empowerment Program in place. So it wasn't just me, it wasn't just my staff. We had the community in the school showing these boys that you can do it because I did it. Let's make that happen all over the country, educators. That's why I'm making this video. Let's make it happen all over the country. Let's make it happen all over the world. Let's make sure that black boys are exposed to successful black men. And then all the other things that we're trying to accomplish through math and reading and writing and history and social studies and foreign language and PE and health and all those other subjects, they will all fall in place when that boy has a purpose for learning. Enough said. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. This is Principal Kafele. Thanks for listening. Black boys need black male role models. Let's do it. Thank you.